So please welcome Dunja Stojkovic from Germany. Please you can introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Dunja. Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. It's my pleasure to be here.
Switch off.
Нет, нам не нужно для трансляции. Все окей.
Okay. Before I go on to the design and the results of this study, I would like to speak a little bit about the history of psychedelics and about some of their characteristics and the research that has already been done in this area. So, according to the existing archaeological data, psychedelic plants have been used since 10,000 years ago, more or less. And they were used in different spiritual and religious purposes in different ceremonies, and today they're still being used in pretty much the same way as in ancient times in certain communities. The first contact that the civilized man had with psychedelic plants happened during the Spanish colonization of the Americas, when Roman Catholic priests whose role was to spread the Catholic faith among the indigenous people, right? They viewed the use of the psychedelic plants as heretical, and they thought that indigenous people used them to speak with the devil, so they strictly prohibited it. Here in the picture, we can see a Mexican man sitting down, eating hallucinogenic mushrooms, and an evil deity behind him, as they thought. Of course, this is what appears when they ingest the mushrooms. Even though they were prohibited, even though psychedelic plants were prohibited, the indigenous people continued to use them in their sacred rituals, only this time more hidden from the Europeans. This is why, after some time had passed, of course, the Europeans started believing that they had actually extinguished these practices, and slowly over time it was forgotten that these plants ever even existed. So, 4 centuries later, Gordon Wasson, a New York banker, decided to travel to Mexico to see whether it was really true, whether hallucinogenic plants, actually mushrooms in this case, really existed. So there he met Maria Sabina, who was the most famous Mexican curandera or healer, right? And she gave him the mushrooms in a sacred ritual. Afterwards, he went back to the US and published a very famous article in Life magazine, where he spoke about his experiences. After publishing this article, Maria Sabina became very famous. So more and more people started going to her and seeking spiritual guidance, so to call it. Many of them were famous, like the members of the Beatles, for example. But what happened was that Maria Sabina, after some time, lamented a little bit becoming famous, because she said that while the indigenous use these plants for healing or spiritual purposes, that the white man uses them for pleasure. So she lamented, saying, the power of the sacrament has been lost in the clouds. Going forward, the interest of the public in psychoactive plants was growing more and more. But it was only after the accidental discovery of LSD by Albert Hofmann that science took an interest as well. Pharmaceutical companies started sending synthesized versions of LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin to different scientists, and they were promoting research in this area. But not only promoting research, they were also encouraging scientists to take the psychedelics themselves, because they thought that this would help them better understand states like disorders like schizophrenia or psychosis, as they believed that these disorders had many similarities with the psychedelic state of mind. So the early research that was done in this period was very promising. It showed very promising results. and it showed never before seen rates of success in treating depression, anxiety, nicotine addiction, alcohol addiction, and also the ability to induce mystical experiences in people. However, not everything went as well all the time. So the enthusiasm lasted for around 10 to 15 years. After that, psychedelics started escaping from the laboratories and spreading among the US youth who was protesting against the war in Vietnam at the time. So due to these political reasons, as well as some new research that was showing certain possible harm that psychedelics can cause, and due to some other problems, right? They were soon prohibited by law around the year of 1970, and by this, basically all the research stopped. Despite the law restrictions, many renowned scientists still believe that this early research, as flawed as it might have been, showed some pretty amazing results. So they thought to continue with the research. So nowadays we have organizations like MAPS, CIIS, have the Research Institute, and others, who fought to obtain licenses to continue with psychedelic research, and who are now responsible for many new, more rigorous and serious studies using psychedelics that show once again very promising results. Now, going back to psilocybin in particular, which was the substance in question in this study as well. Psilocybin is the compound of more than 200 species of mushrooms, collectively called psilocybin mushrooms. When ingested, psilocybin causes changes in perception, like hallucinations, illusions, synesthesia, and many others. It also causes changes in thought processes, depersonalization, derealization, mood swings, etc., etc. There are many others, as we will see afterwards. There hasn't been a single case of, so to call it, psilocybin overdose, which means it has no somatic toxicity, and also it doesn't have any effect on the dopaminergic pathway, which means it causes no addiction, it causes no craving or withdrawal or anything similar. For a long time, it was thought that under the effects of psilocybin, the brain becomes more active. However, a study from 2012 showed that this is not the case, that actually there is a decreased blood flow in many subcortical brain regions and connections. And the regions that are the most active in the normal state show the strongest deactivation in a psychedelic state under the influence of psilocybin. And it has also been shown that while the normal, usual brain connections decrease, a new strong activity is recorded between brain regions that rarely or never communicate. So that is what we see in the picture as well. This is the first one on the left. Is brain in a normal state or under the influence of the placebo, and on the right we have the brain under psilocybin, where we see many more connections, right? So, as in most other areas, here also quantitative studies are much more common. And these new ones that I mentioned, right, the more rigorous ones, have shown that psilocybin significantly reduces anxiety and depression in patients suffering from a life-threatening disease, that it can be used to treat nicotine and alcohol addiction, that it significantly reduces symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder, and that it decreases the quality of life of those who are suffering from any kind of disorder. However, there has been much talk about the need of qualitative studies as well, because they would help us better understand the underlying mechanisms of these important psychological changes that people go through after consuming psilocybin. So this exactly was my goal in this study. As magic mushrooms are prohibited in Serbia by law, as in most other countries, I decided to do interviews with people who voluntarily applied to an online announcement I made about the research, and who had consumed psilocybin mushrooms a day before I spoke to them. After acquiring the data, I used interpretative phenomenological analysis, and it produced 16 themes organized in 3 temporal clusters. Category number 1 refers to what happened to the participants before they consumed the mushrooms. So, before consuming them, most participants went through a state of fear. They feared that once they take the mushrooms, they would lose control over their minds. That is why they wanted to acquire a lot of information about them before they could consume them. They were preparing their environment so that it would be a pleasant, comfortable one. They asked for another person to be there, to be present while they were under the effect, so that once they stepped into the unknown, they would have like an anchor to hold on to. Category number 2 refers to what happened to the participants once under the effect of psilocybin. So the first things that they could notice were perceptual changes, most commonly hallucinations, and strong physical manifestations. Strong physical manifestations included trembling, coldness, a sense of coldness, wetness, or mild nausea. And while these effects appeared in the beginning mostly, they usually lasted throughout the experience as well. So they marked the beginning of the experiences, but they didn't go away until the end of the experience. Some participants were very influenced by the expectations they had. They had certain expectations either based on their previous experiences or based on what other people had told them about what it would look like, what their experience would look like. And these expectations showed to be an obstacle, basically. It made it much harder for them to just let go of control and let the experience unfold. Many participants also had a painful encounter with personal content. Participants didn't view this actually as necessarily as bad. On the contrary, they viewed it as central in reaching the insights that made their experiences personally significant. As one participant put it, it happened more or less in the peak of my experience. It was related to cancer. When I closed my eyes, all the figures and fractals that were beautiful and colorful in the beginning started turning into these bad, malicious, dark shapes. It reminded me of thorns. And I figured it was cancer spreading and eating everything up. And I also figured it was my internal fight. Many participants also experienced catharsis in the form of intense crying or laughing, or both at the same time, which they said they couldn't possibly do in a normal state, cry and laugh at the same time. And it often happened that after this cathartic cleansing, that after they were able to pass into a state of peace and relaxation. Participants especially stressed the immersive nature of the experience. They said that what they learned directly in an experiential way, not just intellectually, let's say. One participant put it like this: with regard to this story from my childhood, as much as I rationally knew I lacked this or that, I never actually felt it. I just assumed it must have been difficult. But now I went through it. I felt the pain, I was back there, I went back there. It's as if the little girl inside of me finally cried it all out. Going forward to, this immersive quality of the experience that I just mentioned made it difficult for the participants, often made it difficult for them to express what they experienced in words. As one of them put it, all the answers are there. It's also clear and wonderful, although I could never put it in words. And in most cases, only once the participants were able to let go of their expectations, to give into the experience, to accept what was happening to them without trying to somehow change it or make it go away, that only then were they able to reach a resolution. We'll have to skip some of the themes. I will mention presidential experiences. So some of the participants had experiences that were especially important to them and that had spiritual and mystical elements. This participant said, "At that moment, I knew we were all one. I had a sense that God was light, but the kind of light that had a presence to it, and that this light was inside of me, that I was made out of light, and everyone else as well." Going to category number 3. This is what happened, what participants told me a day after they ingested the mushrooms and to them. So a day after the experience, when I spoke to the participants, they told me that they felt peace and relief, and they also spoke about the mushrooms as very important tools for them to kind of find out some important things about themselves. This one said, "Mushrooms never lie. They show you the ugly truth, and you have no choice but to face it." This is how he experienced it, and this is actually what many participants said. Finally, participants spoke about how they would integrate these insights into their daily lives. They said that just by having this experience, it's not all over. It's not like their lives just magically became better and without problems, right? So they knew that they would have to work hard in order to actually implement all the insights that they have gained. This one participant said it very nicely. "It's as if I had read the ending of a book, and now I have to go to the first page and work my way towards the ending. There is serious work that you need to do after you go back to normal." Okay, so the strong impressions and consequences that this experience had on participants after only just a couple of hours of being in this state could possibly best be explained by the immersive nature of the experience that I previously mentioned, as it seems that this allowed them to somehow step out of their usual way of relating to their life's issues. And this is actually also in accordance with the brain studies that I mentioned, where old connections are somehow decreased and new connections are being made. So altogether, considering participants' positive impressions, their good ability of tolerating difficult psilocybin effects, their inspiration for introducing positive behavioral changes into their lives, and the absence of the desire to repeat the psilocybin experience soon, which speaks in favor of its lack of addictiveness, I am of the opinion that psilocybin has the potential to be used in therapeutic purposes and for personal growth and development, and that research in this area should be continued. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louis, for this amazing presentation. I guess everybody, like I did, asked myself, when are we going to start with the practical part of this presentation? So we are going to come back to your amazing speech during our round table without a table discussion. And now I would like to introduce our next speakers in the category social project. I would like to invite Lena and Christina to join me on the stage.
We'll take turns.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start with Christina, and Christina, I also would like to ask you to introduce yourself. Okay?
Good afternoon. My name is Christina. I'm a scientist.
Turn it off.
Давно? У нас выключен микрофон.
Микрофон, да, включить.
Да, пожалуйста.
А мне казалось, что громче.
уже сейчас нужно включить?
On new information laboratory and partner and research relationship institute. We are partners with Liga. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to introduce ourselves like a company and our products. I want to say a few words about our company. As scientists and therapists working on a private practice and corporate domain, we offer ways to challenge, distinguish from other therapists on the market, ourselves distinguish from other therapists on the market, and help our clients build their personal brand. Through our work, we determined that it's very important to have value that we can share with our clients and colleagues. When we start our project, in the first thing what we think, why we doing this? It's very important questions, and we're thinking about very long. And after that, why and what value do we bring in the profession? Who are people around us? Who we consider colleagues and who are competitors? What is that we will never do, no matter how much money we offer it? What is acceptable for society and absolutely unacceptable for us? And honest answers will form solid foundation, our unique value. I strongly recommend it. It's very useful experience. I'm not strongly recommend it. It's very useful exercise. If you start thinking about your personal brand, just think about it. It's very important questions. Lena and I have come to a conclusion that we want to change and grow our industry. We are working and researching on topics, and as well as creating instruments that will change the way psychodiagnosis are done, and it will disrupt the industry as a whole. Actually, today we would like to present one of our projects that focuses on the development new diagnostic products and methodologies would enable therapists across all domains and modalities help domains and modalities that would enable therapists to make a more accurate diagnosis and efficient treatment plan. Without further ado, I will ask my partner Lena again to go into details.
It's okay.
Good afternoon again. I'll just pick up on where we left off. As Christina has mentioned, we've established Relationships Research Institute to research into everything relationships. Relationship with yourself, with others, within the family, parents, children, and so that's the main focus of our scientific aspiration. But in addition to that, I'd just like to feel free to read this. But along with that, we said, what do we as therapists, as business people, what do we do to change our industry, to make it more established? Mental health, and I've lived in New York for 20 years, mental health has always been like the second cousin of healthcare. And it has always been a little laughed at because you don't have any medical influence there. Well, how do you marry that medical influence into psychotherapy without sacrificing the one thing that we do is listening to patients and really working with them. And working in psychiatric institution in the US, I've understood that most of the time psychiatrists are there to deal with prescription medication and the dosages of it. And nurses within the hospital are those that actually listen and speak to the patients, and social workers and psychotherapists, and that's the support system that the patient needs, because medications alone don't do it as far as cure goes. They take away the symptoms, but where is the cure that we're looking for? So when we said, well, what is our approach to this? How are we going to tackle that? Aside from learning different modalities and implementing and seeing what works and what not in the practice, in the private practice, and in the corporate domain for that matter, we said we need to come up with something better than what already exists. What can we bring as a value? What legacy are we going to leave when we're going to go? And that's how we came about to put together a new instrument. And I always needed a systematic approach to everything. Everything has to be sorted out, so I got myself certified in over 15 different methodologies on psychological typologies. MBTI, whatnot, there's plenty of them that have been validated and tested that are considered to be good. And then and that's late 90s. And then I said, okay, well, none of these methodologies really work 100% of the time. And if it doesn't work 100% of the time, what good is it? Can you really use it? I mean, it gives you a little bit of insight, but how valid is valid? And so, together with a group of colleagues, we've developed a new methodology that is now called cytonomics. And that is currently doing a scientific validation of, outside of empirical and experimental validation for over 20 years, doing a scientific validation as part of my PhD program at Sigmund Freud University. So I said, I want a solid scientific foundation for it so that when we come to psychotherapists and we say, use this instrument, they say, well, where did that come from? And we say, well, here's all the scientific work to prove that it is actually working. Take it. And that was one part of it. And then we said, okay, well, that's good. We have an instrument that actually works. But how are we going to collect data to continue supporting that it works? And how are we going to marry that medical side of things into the whole aspect and approach to psychotherapy? How are we going to make sure that when the instrument is used, it is actually providing a valid result and then properly implemented into treatment plans, right? Because you can train psychotherapists on how to use your instrument and how to administer, test, and interpret the results of it. You can even standardize it for all that matters. But then, how do you know that there are results that a patient gets on the other end? So we said, okay, let's do this step by step. Step one is how are we going to collect data? And of course, we live, this is where the business sense comes in. We live in a time when everybody has one of these in their hands. Oh, I just brought mine. Not anymore. Not anymore? No, this one is pretty durable for some reason. But one of these, and everybody has that. Children, parents, you name it. My 2-year-old son has it. We don't actually allow him to use it a lot, but for Montessori exercises only. I want it on the record. But everybody has this, and data comes in different languages from different corners of the world when you can put it in the hands of the users. So we're this late fall, we're launching a pilot mobile app with cytonomics, psychological testing, and results that you can use within the practice as therapists, as well as different articles that can be helpful for both parents and children themselves. Our main segment is from 6 to 12, but the test is actually available for adults and will be available within the app, among other standardized tests that, like the share test, the color test that is still being used for children for some reason, and the MMTCI, and that's the children's version of MBTI that's being used, just so you see how the results cross-reference each other and how they correlate to one another. Because when you use a new instrument, you want to make sure that it's valid in your own sense, right? That you will believe that it's valid. And for that, you need other instruments to see how it is correlate to one another. So the basis for cytonomics, it's a multiple intelligence approach. I've been working a little bit with Howard Gardner, who've been exchanging mails, who is essentially the father of a multiple intelligence approach. And but ours is slightly different. It's a psychometric personality theory. It's an inventory instrument, obviously. And essentially the basics of it is that a person is born with a certain number of intellects. And an intellect in this instant is a compilation of 4 aspects: behavioral patterns, linguistic patterns, personality traits, and life values. And one of the things that you can really test, and for a long time I didn't believe in tests altogether. I said, that doesn't work. It only, measures your state of being at the time when you take a test. You take it at a different time, you get a different MBTI score. You get different letters. What's the matter with that? And so here we say that the best way to measure it is through linguistics. And of course, psycholinguistics and research within psycholinguistics is a big part of what we do. But we also say that a person is born with certain predispositions and certain inborn qualities, and a number of these intellects that sometimes put us with internal conflict when we don't agree with ourselves, and I want to sit and run at the same time. And they develop throughout your life. And mostly you have the foundation that's being developed when you're a child up until the age of 6. At 6, you can already see the character of a child and their predispositions, and the role of a parent, a therapist, a caregiver, and it's a whole ecosystem that you have to take into consideration, all of the caretakers of a child, that will push him into the directions that they need to go, so that they develop the best way that they can. I said, okay, well, this works, we're testing it out. We're making sure that it's valid and it's a scientific instrument rather than something that we just came up with. And so we said, okay, well, it's an ecosystem that you have to create around that children. And that also applies to adults, except adults depend less on the caregivers, but they still come in contact with those that they consider their teachers or colleagues, as a matter of fact, later in life, and psychotherapists that they interact with out of their own will. I said, okay, well, for psychotherapists, we need something more elaborate, as I said, that medicalization of it, and I don't mean in the sense of pills. And so we said, there are 2 ways. We've met some wonderful scientists who are doing their science in the realm of epigenetics. And just a quick sort of side view of what epigenetics is, the way that it was in layman's terms. Epigenetics essentially focuses on the epigene is a program that influences the temperament of the gene, right? So you were born with a certain genetic code, and then epigenetic programs actually determine whether your genes will develop or not. And there were plenty of studies done, but one that impressed me the most was a study on twins under the age of 1, so infants really. And so they did the epigenetic test, and right now it's a blood test, but right now it's an expensive blood test, but it will obviously become cheaper and cheaper as we progress. And they saw that these kids don't develop both physically and intellectually because their genetic codes are suppressed because of the hostile environment around them. And then once they were adapted, they redid the test, and they saw that their epigenetic programming has changed. And then they started to rapidly develop both physically and intellectually. So we said, okay, your environment influences your genetic realization, right? So we said, well, then that means that in terms of artificial intelligence, if you apply it to a human being, we can pretty much program ourselves if we change our environment. But how do we take genetic testing and epigenetic testing and convert it into information that we as psychotherapists can use in our practices, or that anybody can read, right? It's a whole bunch of, seen medical tests. They don't do anything, they don't tell you what to do. So with that said, we're gonna take our instrument and we're gonna marry it to epigenetics, or psychogenetics in this matter, using the linguistic aspects of it, and using the genetic testing, and see if there's correlation between genetic markers and personality traits. And once we establish that, and here we're looking to engage big genetic companies and I don't want to name names for the record because we don't have official contracts yet, but the ones that have millions and millions of people that already gone through genetic testing, so that they would take our psychological test. This way we'll have big data right away that we can use and actually determine where is the correlations between personality traits and genetic markers. Then, once a person gets into your practice, and it doesn't matter which modality you practice, it will just influence the way you'll structure your treatment plan, right? And how you work with patients, what instruments you'll include or not. So a patient comes in, they go through psychological testing on an intake. They go through a genetic testing, an epigenetic testing on an intake. You have certain data that is now being interpreted to you. Maya, I'm sure, will create a separate app just for psychotherapists so that you have the insight into your patient's record. And then you say, okay, I see that the predispositions of that patient towards certain mental illnesses are this, and this. Then I also see that physically that patient can suffer from this, and this, and then his genetic makeup is such, these genetic markers give you certain predispositions as itself. And as you structure your treatment plan, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, you redo the test, and you see how it changed. And because you can now prove the change based on blood tests, pretty much, you can now say that the treatment and the course of treatment was valid because we've progressed and the change, we see a positive dynamic, not only in the behavior of a patient, not only because the patient came in and said, listen doc, I feel much better now, but because you could also see it structured on their genetic level, changes, reprogramming to their identity and reprogramming to their life. And that's essentially, a lot of patients come to us and they ask us for help. But they don't just want to get rid of their depression, or they don't just want to get rid of something that bothers them. They want a better quality of life altogether when they finish their therapy or during therapy. And being able to prove it, being able, just for yourself even, to be able to determine, am I going in the right directions with this patient? Is he or she just saying that they're feeling better, but they're coming in and the problem is not going away? Do I need to change the course of treatment for a given person? Then this will essentially give you that needed intake and needed insight into the treatment plan. That's it. That's good class. That's it. Okay. Yay. I'll take questions.
So, introducing your speech, I was doing like, we are going to speak about future of psychotherapy. Now, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. It is the future. And I was already having fantasies on maybe psychotherapists or doctors are going to have some kind of mobile phones and you can make the blood test just immediately and get the analysis. So, yeah. Dear friends and colleagues, we are good at time, so we can spend 5 more minutes on questions to Lena and Christina's presentation. Or if you have questions to Dunya's presentation, you can also use the time now and ask questions.
Yes.
Considering that, I suppose that right now these genetic tests are still very expensive, right?
Genetic tests are not, epigenetic tests are, but as you know, genetic tests were expensive even a year ago. As medicine progresses, there is also advancements in this. We have a couple of epigenetics scientists that work with us. They're based out in Amsterdam, and even their prognosis on it is that it's going to become much cheaper very quickly. It's like technology.
Yes.
You know, it's very expensive, and all of a sudden you can buy a USB port for nothing.
Okay.
You know, they allowed the use of mushrooms. I just want to count on that.
Yeah. Do I have a kind of the worst case scenario fantasy?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you? Go for it. Tell us.
The worst case scenario?
Yeah. What the evil mind could do with your project?
I don't know. I mean, this information is not confidential per se. You know, it's confidential as far as all medical records go. So that's there are laws to protect that already, and it's no different than that. And then it's really, I don't think there should be evil people in the profession. So I don't think of an evil case scenario when you know what to do to get your patient better, but you don't do it and do quite the opposite. So that hardly ever happens, if at all. So there's really no downside. It's more of an additional insight into your patient's life, an additional dimension that you can use in practice that will essentially put you on the same level as any medical doctor.
In which area you are about to use your application first? Is it going to happen in the United States or Russia?
So the first pilot is going to be launched in both English and Russian, and will be distributed in Russia because we're here quite a bit, and then in the US, UK, and all the countries that speak English because we have access. And then and it's actually being approved in App Store right now, and then the first iteration we're positioning, and that's talking about personal brands, so going a little bit further into discussion, we're positioning as an application for parents and teachers. Then a few months into this, we'll have a train-the-trainer program for psychotherapists and teachers to learn how the methodology works and how to work with the intellect and how the personality test is built. So they are able to get clients through the app for those that want local presence and local interactions. And then a little later down the road, we'll have a similar instrument for business, because a lot of corporate clients are now requesting psychotherapists and psychologists to be on staff to work with their employees. And so that's one of the dimensions that we're introducing it to. Also providing psychotherapists with an opportunity to work outside of private practice and into the corporate domain, which hardly ever happens. And if it happens, it's not a common thing for it to happen. So we want to build that bridge. Then as we progress with our research into psychogenetics, there's going to be a version 2.0 or 3.0 that will also include where you could scan in your test results, or they'll automatically be scanned in from the company you do tests with, and that will be introduced as the next one. So that's the big plan.
Cool. Peter?
Yeah, excuse me if this isn't
Please
your
speak up.
forte, but how did you acquire the linguistic data? And what is it read?
Okay, so the linguistic data, and I will most certainly share it with you afterwards, just we'll exchange emails, because there's a lot of research that's been done into linguistics and how it influences our personality, and of course, and so we've also done this with people over 20 years course in different domains. For example, I was a school director in New York for 8 years and at Franklin Career Institute, and that was a professional school. And so we did that with our students a lot to see in their essays and then to analyze free text. There are algorithms, not to go into the technology of it, but there are algorithms that can analyze free text when you transcribe, and analyzes the words that you use and the patterns, linguistic patterns, and that can be then linked to personality traits and specific behaviors.
Yeah, I was wondering if you saw the new MIT research where they're finally getting semantics in there.
And that's very good. And we're certainly launching out on that too. Or waiting for it to happen, not launching out.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dana. Thank you. So we're done with the first part.
I wanted to
Professor,
say
please.
something to the psilocybin study, because it's interesting phenomenon that now comes back, the research on these drugs or these substances, also in Switzerland and in Sweden. But it was not useful for psychotherapy. I remember the times in the 60s, 70s, when there were a lot of experiments with narco analysis, it was called. That was, the idea was to give LSD, and then you get psychotic, and at the same time you are with a psychotherapist. And Mr. Leiner was the big man in Central Europe, and with his days it ended. And there was recently a criminal case in Germany where a few years ago, where there is a community which still makes narcoanalysis, but the leader of it he's a medical doctor, and he did not oversee that a person was dying. And she died, and then it was finished again. So the hope that with LSD, I remember very well they said it will be faster, much faster and intense. It did not fulfill the hopes with LSD. Psilocybin was also a very interesting time in the 70s and the 80s with Castaneda books. Castaneda was popular, like, I don't know, today Maradona. And his books were everywhere. And Castaneda was visiting traditional healers in Latin America. After this, you mentioned this was in the late 50s, but Castaneda was later. And I took twice psilocybin to test it. And I must say it was a gorgeous experience, very nice experience. I remember one thing was that every word I spoke, I had become a figure. Yeah, it was
Like a visual?
a form. So it was fascinating. But I could not see, besides that it's the experience itself, it's fascinating. How to use it for psychotherapeutic things. So I remember very well positive the phase in which I was under the drug, about 2-3 hours, but that was it. This was my experience. So that I remembered when you talked about it, long forgotten things. So the proof whether it is useful for psychotherapy is not yet, from my point of view, not yet done, but it can help with when you are in difficult states, like when you are severely ill with cancer. But there is another substance that is marijuana, which is now in some countries already allowed, in others in front of getting the permission to use it for severe physical states, especially. So the marijuana is proved to be useful.
True. Marijuana, do you use marijuana more for lessening the pain and things like that?
Yes.
But when I mentioned these studies about psychedelics and people who are dying of cancer, right? They were used in these cases to treat the psychological conditions, the depression and anxiety and interpersonal problems these people were having, and things like that, right? So in these cases, it would to be of use. But another interesting thing is that in these studies, they would give people, first of all, it would be a very controlled setting, right? In a hospital with shades on, with therapists nearby, with a lot of things. And they would give them extremely high dosages of psilocybin. So I suppose that, for example, when you had your experience, you didn't take such a high dosage, because usually people don't take such high dosages when they first try it, right? But with these people, and it was surprising for me to read as well, they give them a very high dose of psilocybin, which then induces a very, very intense experience. And it seems that this has something to do with the results that they were getting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This was about experiences of self-left.
Now, Koch, yes, Koch was also using later on he left the drugs and used everything to go into early stages.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we are about to make a break, and if you want to join for my presentation, it's in hall 1. But please don't forget to take your translators. Yeah.
Okay, which language are you using?
I'm going to speak in Russian, but there's going to be English translation. Yeah?
Right.
As long as it's not your. So what do you think?
Well, we will see.
Next week.
You present the idea.
For first, and then with vocabulary.
And we will see the results.
When are you going back?
Oh, right.
Что, берем грибы? Very interesting.
Да? Are we on air? So, сейчас подождем секунду. Es fängt um 5 an, aber wir werden nach 6 Uhr kommen, weil Kongress geht eigentlich um 6 oder 8 Uhr. Das heißt, wenn Sie so gegen 6 dort sind, wird sicher so was sein. Es wird auch gezeigt, auch mit dem Zeichen. Ja, wenn Sie in Yoga stehen, sehen Sie 20. Building sehen und dann 20. Stock. Wenn nicht, dann sind Sie nicht. Ich habe Ihnen was sagen. Ja, danke sehr gerne. Musst du das? So, bist du fertig? Ja, bist du bereit? Ja, bist du bereit. So, Sergej, wir начинаем, да?
Ja.
Okay. Dear friends and colleagues, we are starting with our discussion on self-branding and targeting in helping profession. And the main goal of this discussion is to think and talk about the ethical aspects of self-branding in helping profession, and also to think about of working with media for changing the meaning and realization of our professional image through the people on different social levels. And I'm very happy to introduce you to our first speaker. It's Dr. Sandra Kildorfer from Austria. She's a very famous TV star psychotherapist in German-speaking countries. And dear Sandra, I'm looking forward to learn more about your way of working with the big media.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Dear colleagues, I'm very glad to speak about a topic which becomes more and more important in our profession. how we can ourselves present in media, in social media, and what are the ethical aspects, and how can our profession improve so that more people know and understand what are psychotherapists for, what they have to offer, and how their ideas and their methods and their thoughts maybe can change their thoughts and the emotions, and maybe can improve the world in sense of having better relationships and having better psyche or mental health. I'm based in Austria and in Germany. I'm a Viennese psychoanalyst, and 5 years ago I stepped into the TV, and it was quite a challenge for me, because when you became a psychoanalyst in Vienna, you learn that your professional card is enough, or mouth-to-mouth advertisement. So you shouldn't present yourself to the public. But the technology grows, and it's more and more needed. Even there's no paid, the therapies are not paid by insurance. So you have to promote, but you're not allowed to advertise. So what are the ethical guidelines? In the countries where the psychotherapeutic profession is, thank you very much. In the countries where there is a psychotherapeutic law or regulation, there are guidelines how to advertise, and you shouldn't. The guidelines, the last one who fits out how to act on social media or on media came from 2010 till 2014, and they say there every year comes more and more technology and more laws, and we couldn't follow all the rules and all the new platforms, so they stopped writing guidelines. The last guidelines, from 2014, and also papers on it. There are ethical frameworks how to use social media, for example, and they recommend that you should, or every professional should make their own rules, their own guidelines how to use social media and or being in media, and not to hurt your ethical general guidelines. For example, you shouldn't interact in the public on social media with your patient. So, there are, I think, the guidelines you can imagine, which are just normal for our profession. I step back to the reason why I go into the TV, because I know it's important that there are psychotherapists on TV, that the masses know that there is a psychotherapist. And I thought, if only that one thing happened, that some person sitting at home watching TV and say, there's a psychotherapist and what they are doing. So I think that was enough for me, that the society knows more about our profession, and I don't want to give it to some coaches or healing practitioners. So the TV format I work for, it's a social experiment, and it's it sounds in the beginning really dramatic. It's called Married at First Sight, and it's an international TV format, and I have to say in Germany it works really well, also for the TV channel. So the peak was 16.8 shares, so we have a lot of viewers, so 2.5 viewers for every show, every episode. So that's a lot. And yeah, there you just see me how I interact with candidates, how I interview them, what I say to them, what I say in general to different kind of problems. And so if you are interested in work in media, you have to look, is there a law in your country? Is there a guideline in your country? And to respect it. And also find your way how to deal with it and how you can go out. So one of the guidelines in Germany is that I shouldn't address it too problematic on a person, or I couldn't be very confrontating, or I shouldn't really, say something bad can be bad for the person. So there is no guideline in general. So you have to look what are yours in your country and what are your personal guidelines. I had a lot of anxieties to go into the TV. Because in Germany, for example, I'm in the doctoral register, and I thought, oh my God, maybe the ethical committee knocks on my door and put away my application. So I risk a lot, but I think you have maybe to risk a bit. But because nothing happened. And what they say is, don't be too personal, don't show you too much, don't be too self-opening. But I'm not really sure where are the borders, which is, should you only be shy and distant and should be a white wall, or how much you should give to the persons. And I talk and make some research and I ask people, should psychotherapists go to social media? Should they present themselves? And they say yes. 95% say yes, go on. And I want to know who you are, because I want to understand my psychotherapist more. I want to meet a real person and not the mystificated one and with all the authority. Yeah. So. And I think that will become more common, and so psychotherapists, they shouldn't be isolated because of the guidelines or the ethical frames and go out from the society or isolate themselves. More by not being into social media, by not being in this field. Because it's also the reality from the patients. They also have Facebook and Instagram and connect to it and connect to each other. So it's an extension of the self, and I think we just have to work with it, and we should use it as a tool, as an extent of ourselves and of our representation. And we should be role models also for the, not only for the patients, also for the society, how to interact in a virtual world. And I don't know, what's the time?
I'm just being fascinated by this artistic play of the lights on your face.
Live stream.
You have a few more minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So, how can psychotherapists overcome their fears? But because psychotherapists have are very fearful to expose themselves. Mostly psychotherapists are shy, distant, introvert, don't want to give too much insight to the public. So, and as you said, how or who wants to become a psychotherapist, how are they bonded, or what are their experiences and what are their attitudes to present themselves. And I think it needs role models like Ekaterina or Dr. Judy or me, for instance. So, and Professor Prince, that more psychotherapists are feel that they are allowed to express themselves, and not only in social media, and not only giving personal information or for their ego or for, I don't know, but we have so many platforms, and it's so much easier to spread out our ideas and our thoughts on anxiety, on depression, on. And we should use it. That's all I have to say. Do it and start with it. Get the skills. Find your role models. Take every opportunity you can get to talk, to practice, to go out and talk with PR, talk with the newspapers, write on it, because we need to, not only the politics have their own responsibility for our profession to make it bigger or widely known by the public, because when the public say we need more psychotherapists or we need psychotherapeutic laws, then also the politics think, oh, we have to form a law, we have to take the profession, we should do the, how should I say? So it's not
Correct on it.
Yeah. So it also should come from the public that say we need highly educated psychotherapists, good trained psychotherapists, and what they have to offer. And when the people know, oh, I need a special psychotherapist, then maybe the laws and the politics can change their mind. And maybe we can improve our profession, and we have so much to give. We are the best by dealing with anxieties. We are specialized about it, so I hope we also overcome our anxieties by our self-opening. And when we are overwhelmed, we can handle that, and we have all the tools. And so I think we are we are also specialized on communication and how interaction works. And I think, we should go out into the world and make a community, maybe more on media psychotherapy. And I hope that you become more courage to go out and to show our profession. And I think that's all I have to say at this point. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra. So this is interesting because Germany and also Austria there are just few countries actually having a guideline for psychotherapists how they should behave in the public. And guidelines should be something what guides you to make you feel more secure or be more sure about what are you doing. And it was so interesting to realize that sometimes guidelines are also making you even more insecure about what would be okay to do and what not. I would like, thank you very much. I would like to go to our next presenter. Okay. Tatiana Pisarenko from Kiev, Ukraine.
Hello everybody, my name is Tatiana Pisarenko. I'm from Kiev, from Ukraine, and I'd like to share some thoughts about psychotherapy
developing psychotherapy in Ukraine. And some words about myself, about my center, and so I shall start with that in general. So we have at the moment we have different branches in Ukraine, such as psychoanalysis, we have Gestalt therapy, we have a family system, we have Adlerian, and many others. But to my mind, psychotherapy is still very much in its childhood at the moment. To my mind, the main problem in Ukraine at the moment is that psychotherapy is not regulated by the law. And we listened yesterday to Professor Fritz, and he's talked about this, but like psychotherapist. Who is it? In Ukraine, psychotherapist is medical doctor, psychiatrist. Well, after I finished PhD program, and I call myself psychotherapist. I have finished, I did my PhD at SFU in Vienna. And there's such a confusion for clients. When the client comes, he says, okay, you're a psychotherapist, and you can give a pill for me. No, I can't, I'm not a medical doctor. Then you are a psychologist. No, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a psychoanalyst. What is the difference between all that? If you are not a medical doctor, why are you a psychotherapist? Why are you called psychotherapist? The other reason of the problem of that psychotherapy is not regulated at the moment in Ukraine, that each person who listens to some lectures of different psychologists, he can call himself psychologist, he can call himself psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, of course not psychiatrist. And this problem I faced when I have my Center for Practical Psychology. You see, my center is called for Practical Psychology and Psychoanalysis, because we exist, but we are invisible. There's no psychoanalysis in Ukraine, like regulated by law. Psychologists and psychiatrists. And I have a few rooms to work with clients, and sometimes I meet some different people who come and say that I'm a psychologist and I want to rent your rooms for my practice. And I have a questionnaire. I ask some questions, just what about your education? Well, I listened to the lectures. Okay, did you have your own analysis? No, I didn't. Why do you call yourself psychotherapist or psychologist? Because I have clients and I have been working for the last 2 or 3 years. You see, it's a problem. It's a problem in understanding that it's not about trust and confidence to our profession. So, about educational system in psychotherapy in Ukraine, to my mind, it's not very good. I think in western part of Ukraine, in Lviv, it's much more better than in Kiev. For example, when I got my education, I studied in Kiev just for diploma, Ukrainian diploma. And the main course I took in St. Petersburg, where the school is much more better. And PhD, as I told, I did in Vienna. And I'm in position to compare the educational system, for example, Austrian and Ukrainian. And I can make a conclusion that in Ukraine it's on low position. And in Austria it's perfect. And we keep hoping that one day Professor Fritz will open his branch in Kiev. Maybe. So, and okay, about PhD program. Can we write a PhD? Can we do PhD program or postdoctoral program in Kiev in psychoanalysis? Of course, no. After I did my PhD, I wanted to be registered in Ukraine. So I came to the ministry, I don't remember what kind of ministry was it, and when I told that I want to be registered because I have my diploma, the man asked me, medical doctor? I don't know. Psychologist? No. I don't know what to do with it. And in a few days he told that you have a diploma, keep it and show to everybody that you are a doctor in psychoanalysis. So, but at the moment I've been running for the last 4 years my own center. I'm a founder and I opened it 4 years ago. And at the moment we have a team of 5, me and 4 my colleagues. I have also, I work with a psychoanalyst, then we have a Gestalt therapist, we have a children psychologist and child psychologist, and we have life and business coach. So we have many different programs, and my main program, I work much with women, Ukrainian women, and I wrote my dissertation on the topic looking for identity of Ukrainian women through the conflict between mothers and daughters. And we have many programs, educational ones, on different topics, and also we have such a women's club. It's for women, where we invite for some lectures from successful women, for different doctors. We speak about everything, about all the problems of women in Ukraine. And well, I wanted to show you one. Also, I'm usually invited to different women's clubs, business women clubs, just to give lectures, and it's one of them, just a short video where I was invited like a speaker. How it's good sound. So, some psychotherapy in Kiev and in Ukraine exists. We are working, and me, for myself, I can say I do everything I can to make psychotherapy and psychoanalysis popular in my country. That's what I think. Thank you.
So, I get a feeling after our first 2 women, Sandra said, just find yourself, how did you say it? Just find yourself, I just got these words in my head. Role models. And now I could say, oh, become yourself a role model, because you're doing this so much better than all the role models I know. I would like to present our next speaker, Christine Anoshka. Christine I invite you to the stage. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, my name is Christine. I'm a dear friend of Kaitin. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is my first time taking part in something as amazing as this conference. And for people who don't know me, I work for Bloomberg LP, which is a financial technology company. So I'm one of the very few, or maybe the only one, who is not from your field directly, but I'm very interested in that. And knowing the benefits of what you guys do, I've always been a champion in my own field to share this with my other colleagues, right? So I must say the views I'm going to be sharing today are absolutely my own. They're not Bloomberg's, so just for the record, because we're a very famous company. I work as a client manager with major banks, pension funds, with asset managers, with people who manage a lot of money, right? And usually my colleagues are very well educated people who come from different backgrounds into financial technology background. They could be from physics background or from political background, mathematicians, finance, and whatnot, right? So there's many different ways how we come to this profession. But as all people, we deal with stress, with anxiety at work because we all business-minded and we deal with people on a daily basis who are managing a lot of money, and money is always stress in the political environment that we live, the news and all that kind of stuff. So it's very volatile. A lot of these stresses like all the time. You know, how you doing? Oh, I'm so stressed. Right, so, and I lived around the world in the US, in UK, between traveling Moscow and some other cities, right? So I have quite, many friends in many fields around the world, and I can tell there's a big difference between how people, their attitudes towards psychoanalysts and the whole field, right? And in the US and in Canada, everybody has a therapist. It's absolutely normal. People don't say why they go to see a therapist, but you almost consider it to be strange if you don't have one, right? In UK, it's a bit different. People are a bit more conservative. They wouldn't share that with others. In Russia, the people I know and I work with in finance department, I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, I have a therapist." Right? In many countries, it's still considered to be a weakness if you go and see a specialist. Why are you going there? Are you sick? What's wrong with you? Should I even pick up a project with you? If you're not stable. So. I've seen that happen too. So personally, me, I'm quite outspoken about this, and I love to share it with my colleagues. And I've always shared that I have people, helping with that with mental hygiene, and I think it helps me a lot to stay productive, to deal with stuff that I have in life. And a lot of the times, people have referred to me as, "You're so brave to talk about it." And I wish we had more of that in our work environment, because firsthand I got to experience what it's like to work in a toxic environment where the management itself, is not really trained how to handle conversations that are not so pleasant about performance, about, the strategy of the business, and that puts a lot of pressure on the workers themselves, right? Plus, you have major themes in the world like automatization, financial technologies, all sorts of technologies that are coming in, and that businesses are caring about the bottom line, right? So a lot of people in the process of optimization are being replaced by machines, right? So working with so many banks and financial structures, I see how there were departments of 40 people doing trading, and now they downsized to 4, right? Where all these people went, right? In this case, you'd be thinking, who stayed? They have more things that they need to do in all these volatile markets. And the rest of the people who are out of the job, how are they dealing with, what are they gonna do in the world, right? So Bloomberg is great with supporting people who are in transition. I'm really proud to work for this corporation because they invest a lot in people and in managing the clients' communications after people leave the workforce in the current positions that they've been dealing with. But So there's all of that people have to deal with these days, right? But just to build on something that Sandra was talking about, and Ekaterina about the brand and how you guys in the field can help. Of course, I've been speaking to some of you on separate occasions, and some of you mentioned that you're working with corporations, that you're working with management, companies are investing in having this, but companies can invest and HR can be involved and management can be involved. But if we don't have people being receptive on my end, let's say as an employee of the company, if the culture is not there of it's okay to have a therapist, it's good, it can help you to stay more productive, right? It's not really gonna work quite well. So I think we all have to work together, and I would love you guys to be more vocal on the media about the work that you do, about the benefits that it brings, and you can look at it more from self-development side. Because when I speak with my colleagues, who are all extremely intelligent people, right? But when I ask them, like, people share a lot of stuff with me, and I'll ask, how do you deal with these difficult situations in your life? Would that be a divorce or something with their children or illnesses or something like that? Or do you have somebody to help you emotionally? And they'll say, no, we just read self-help books. I'm like, that's all great, but why do you do this? Wouldn't it be faster and more efficient to go see a specialist who would know exactly what to do with you, and then you just pay the money and you're out like a new person, right? And a lot of these guys, because we are trained and we are smart and we know how to do empirical research, they'll say, well, we can do it all ourselves because I'm trained, I'm so smart, which I don't think is working that well. Maybe, for work, but for personal, we tend to obviously overlook, you need somebody else to kind of point you things that you might be overlooking yourself. So going back to you building your brand and attracting clients and working with the business segment, everybody cares about process optimization. How can we be more productive? How can we ensure that we stay employed with all these technologies being what they are? How can we help ourselves stay in the workforce and not be that first guy or woman who would be fired or moved somewhere else, right? So, and I think you can position yourself as this invaluable tool of helping you dealing with whatever you have in life, so you can also stay productive at work, not fall out of it, and not miss on the invaluable opportunities that might come your way. And if you're not in the right mental state, you might drop the ball, what we call, right? Not pay attention to the deal that you're closing, or not pay attention to the technology that it's out there, and somebody else who is younger or somebody who has a therapist and doesn't have to deal with all of this emotional luggage can just come in and take your opportunities. So quantifying it for the people who speak numbers would help to kind of put more value on what is it that you guys doing for them. And going back to what Sandra was saying about you guys being restricted by the laws of not being able to advertise online, on Facebook, on Instagram, right? We all have all of these, tools and stuff. So what happens is, because you're not vocal enough, there are a lot of coaches and magic people who are out there to change your life, who tell you to focus just on positives in your life, right? Negative emotions don't exist, they're all suppressed, we all know where that all ends, right? So they're not trained, they went through their own crisis, probably haven't finished working with that crisis, and now they're out there teaching seminars online and advertising on Instagram. So, and these people are trying to help potential clients who you could be helping being professionally trained, taking your money, taking your spot, and probably making more mess in those people's lives eventually, right? So, yeah, absolutely. I think you guys doing a great job. Like, from my perspective, I think you should be more vocal. You should be using more media, and maybe even going through some trainings of the guys who are actually, know how to do this media stuff, because we're all learning from each other, right? And there's many trainings out there. So if there's going to be better culture for having a therapist, if we're going to be having more people who would share that it's great, and it helps us to stay productive, I think eventually it will go up and disseminate into creating safer and more positive workspaces and just better quality of life for all of us. So good luck in what you do, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine. It was so refreshing. And thinking about the future of psychotherapy, it was such a great pleasure to listen to you saying, yeah, there could be somebody younger and having a therapist, and he's going to take all your opportunities. So, yeah, I want to put this on record and then use it as an advertisement for going to
show it to my colleagues.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I would like to invite. Oh, you're all going to do it in a circle. Okay. I would like to ask you guys, is there somebody else who would like to make a presentation from the stage before we are going to the circle? Okay. Then I'm inviting you to make the circle out of the chairs, and we are going to continue our discussion.
I've actually not remember
Мы сейчас сядем в круг, да? Если вы нам скажете, как это лучше будет. Вот тут
Чтобы смотреться лучше, да, здесь.
Можно чуть-чуть вот здесь вот делать, чтобы на камеру было больше.
Outside? Inside the room.
Okay,
Maybe this one. Just a moment.
Ты остаешься. Все, отлично. Ты остаешься тогда? You want to sit here? Okay. I will sit here next to you.
May I comment the speeches with some anecdotes?
Sure. Yes,
please. With the media, I think we do a very good job, and I was very supportive because I remember when we started, there was a big rumor in Germany and Austria. How can the psychotherapists do that?
Yeah, work in reality TV.
Yes, but now the rumor is over. But I introducing something new media. We had opened about 6 months ago, about that, an Instagram account at our university. Besides Facebook, we had already, because we have a student who is experienced in Instagram.
We are following you. We know
We like everything you post.
Yeah. But I'm not in Instagram personally, but I thought I should bring it to the rectorate. There are 6 people, all are old, including me. And I asked the guy who does the Instagram to present it. And he presented it, and especially one of the faces. This is the end of our culture.
I know.
Yes, no one then is in Instagram, certainly. So this is another generation, another world. This is the first story. And the second story is because you were telling about the confusion of professions, medical doctor, psychologist, psychotherapist, psychiatrist, etc. Already some years ago, a famous organizer of festivities was opening a speech of Professor Ringe. Professor Ringe was a very famous academic, and he was a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst. So he was a psychotherapist. He was also called Mr. Suicide because suicide prevention was his topic. And so he was invited to give a speech, and the organizer said, "May I introduce to you Professor Ringe, world famous psychopath from Vienna." And it is funny when I tell this story, everyone understands what is a psychopath. The other topics not, but. And about the situation in the US, it is also in the US and in Canada also a social class problem, because you have a lot of shrinks at the rim at the borders in the big cities of America, but not very many in the countryside or in the wide plains, so to say, of US. And it is also a question of money.
It's very expensive.
So even more expensive than in Europe. Not in all areas, but so it is a social class problem also in the States, whether you get psychotherapy or not.
I agree that even in some films, if you look at the comedies, I was recently watching on a plane, so there's a situation of this guy says, "I want to go into therapy," and his friend says, "You can't afford a therapy. You sold everything. You live with your mother. You can't afford a therapy." You know, so it's almost like a joke. And also, I'm quite interested in the field of financial therapy, which is they made an institute in the US and they started promoting it. So when I say about it in the UK, sometimes my colleagues ask me, "What are you reading on a plane?" And I said, "Well, it's financial therapy." First response, it sounds expensive. You know, it's like already association with people, and in UK as well, it's just expensive. And but what also always interests me in my world, everybody cares about their image and how they present it to the client. So they would buy a Prada bag for $3-4 grand, but you wouldn't spend £100 an hour for a therapist, right? How about you do that for your image and help you be less neurotic?
It is quite interesting that as I said yesterday about the laws, that many European countries have a law, and in most of the countries where there is a law, there's also public payment. Sweden, in Finland, in Netherlands, Germany, in Austria, in Switzerland.
Belgium.
In Belgium, no.
No, but they got their law last year.
No, they have a law, but no public payment
Yet.
yet. And it's interesting that the Francophone countries don't have it.
They're really expensive.
So Belgium doesn't have it, France doesn't have it, and Italy neither. It's also interesting to see, and certainly not Malta and Croatia. They just implemented the law this year. But in the northern and central Europe countries, they have public payment, and it is increasing, constantly increasing. I remember when we started in 1991, where I was active in getting a law for public payment. We started with 0 expenses, and now they spend, the Social Security spends more than 100 million for psychotherapy, and it's still increasing.
This just brought a question to my mind because I don't know how this is affecting other countries.
that in Germany, because it is covered by the public health system, if someone really wants to see a therapist, they usually have to wait a really long time, like because there are not enough therapists for the need that is in society. So, like if someone in need finally decides to open up about their issues to a doctor and says, I want to go and do a therapy, they usually have to wait like 6 months until they can start. And I think this is not a good situation. I was just wondering, how does that look like in other countries?
Well, this is a complaint on high level, because there are, in most of the countries where there are no regulations, they might wait 5 years, 7 years, because it is not diagnosed correctly. And there is no labeling of psychotherapy. And so, for instance, in Spain or in Portugal, in the other countries where there is no regulation, they wait maybe much longer. We had an investigation in Austria before the law that people waited 7 years to come to a psychotherapist, but not because of lack of psychotherapists, but of not knowing that the problem of being depressed or something like that is has to do with the psyche. They were thinking it is a physical thing, and it changed. A last word to you. I remember very well in the 70s, 80s. The only authorized persons in the TV have been psychiatrists. And I remember one very, very good, his name was Professor Birkmeyer. No, Birkmeyer was before. And he was a serotonin specialist. He was convinced that with changing the serotonin level, depressions are finished. And when he was very old, maybe he retired with 85 from TV. And then we came, my generation came, and nowadays psychiatrists are only asked when there is big violence, crime, or like this. But the normal everyday life neurosis, psychotherapists, psychologists, and counselors are asked. And I think that it is quite good.
Can I just can I answer your question? In Austria, you only get a reimbursement about 10 or 20 or 40%.
No, that's not right.
Huh? And you get it also. There are also seats or places where you can get psychotherapy fully covered, but not for all. And 80% of the psychotherapists I know don't work with this insurance system.
Yeah.
Most of the people come and they pay for the hours, and they get 20 euros back by, I don't know, 18, 90 euros per hour. And only even therefore I think this discussion is so important, how to represent what how should a psychotherapist show his private practice, how he gets into the public, how the people know that he exists there. So
in Austria there's a homepage.
Yeah, there's a homepage.
There's a homepage. A guy understood the need and established in about 25 years ago a homepage where all psychotherapists are mentioned in every region.
Like a directory.
A directory of psychotherapists, which is widely used. So,
Is it public, like government?
And it's also in
no, it's a private
Germany.
company. But there's also a governmental list, but this is a little complicated to come into this list. But see, online is known widely, and he takes the data which he needs from the government, because they are free, and puts it into his homepage. It's very useful.
And it's a great business. So if you want to be better presented at Psi online, you have to pay.
Yeah,
and
you
so
pay.
it's a great business.
But
and
not
too much. And you are not going to get in without sending a scanned copy of your license. Yeah.
Yes.
And the same in
I would like to
There's
present
also-
my time.
Yeah.
With
Can I
the-
take my time?
Yes, in each city, all the
Okay, my friends, my name is Victoria Bikio, because I think that we're started from the people. Okay.
Yeah, we went to the. I asked everybody if
Okay.
there are some presentations, and we went to discussions.
Yes,
Please
but
make your.
I said that for me it's good time for a presentation like this, because I don't like stages. I did some small presentation about me and my center of psychology, and I would like to give you to look some on paper. And I tell that my English not perfect. That's why I take some mistakes. Sorry for that.
Don't worry, the others are also not perfect.
Yeah.
Besides you, besides me.
I was.
And you.
And Peter.
And me.
Yeah, Peter's
Mine's
perfect.
Speaking Austrian English, the Russian accent.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, you have an Instagram.
Yes. Yes, that's why I use a lot social things like Instagram, yeah, and a little bit of Facebook. Usually, I have my diploma from psychologist in 2011. And when I came out from university, I feel that I'm so stupid girl. I don't know nothing, but I had 5 years good practice on schools, on hospitals, on clinic. I did many things, but I feel that I'm very stupid. It was the same with all my students, because Russian education, it's so strange. They're doing it's not special things to work with kids. It's just very easy to go and working with kids, but usually I know it's very difficult way. Anyway, I was feel that I'm stupid. I don't know how to work, where I could go to work, and all my friends from university went usual for schools and kids garden, and they take money I don't know, a few. In Russia, it's very few money. But I was working there also 1 year, but when I stopped, I said no more. I would like to go my way, to my private way, but I need to find psychotherapy school. And I was looking for what I want to do. And I find symbol drama, Yes, it's a little bit and close with art therapy. It was my favorite in my university. And it was so perfect that I find it, because it's really my way. And I find myself in this school, in this program.
And I was so happy because when I came for the first seminar, it was like this, not like this stage and kids. It was like this circle. And we had all seminars like this. We're all the same. And so kind, so friendly, so calm, like family. I don't know, very, very good time and good position to be more clever, more hard, more strong. And then our teacher told us that you should start. Don't be afraid. Please go. If you know these 3 days, you could go and try to do it. And really, and I started step by step. Then with my colleagues, she's from Gestalt, we decided to do some project. It was a psychological project. It was in 2015. We decided to do this project to do trainings because I like private work, but usually I was searching for more like social life maybe. That's why I started to do these trainings. We decided to do it together, like different styles. She's a singer also. We are doing like some energy things with civil drama, art therapy, and we are looking for some interesting things. It was 2 years maybe, and it was very good practice for me. It was a lot of things, many people. I have many comments about this way. But then something happened between us, and we were stopped. Like, I don't know, I don't understand how you use psychoanalysis system. I would like energy or something like this, and we decided to go by own way, and it was good for us. Now she's get married, she has kids, and I have my psychological center, Victoria Bikiva, by my name. Also, it was happened because in this 2 years before, I have some presentation on TV also. It's because many people ask, let's go to this TV, let's go to this TV. For me, it's I like media. Like Sandra, I really feel the same because I think that it's a good way to show you first and to show, to tell people that it's normal, it's good. Psychology is not like just like this or something. I change the mind because when I came, the people are so surprised and like, are you sure you're a psychologist? No, please. It's really like this in our country. They're waiting another person. They want to see another person, but I try to do like new style of psychologist person. Then when we started, it just happened on May in this year. It's just 6 months. I have the center. It's small one. We have small one big room like this maybe, and one small for consultation. And now I'm working just with my manager, director manager. Yes, she helped me. She also Victoria. We are double Victoria, and we're doing some. We decide in this year one program. We started to do this program, volunteer program, because in Russia, if you know, it's volunteer year in this year, and we decide maybe it's good time to do it the same, like not for money, because before it was happened that people don't have money, it's really crisis. It's like this, because before people could come to us, then stop, no. And we decided to do it and to show what we could do. And it was free, and we have good partners with Moscow parks. It was 3 parks where we did program. It was for 8 meetings. It was free for everybody. Also for old people, like Sobyanin program in Moscow.
Silver volunteers. Серебряные волонтеры, да.
Да? Нет, вот я говорю про московское долголетие. Okay, and
Then retired people, so old people, as you used to say, are getting a possibility to go on social volunteering.
I mean that we are working for old people. Like old people came to us our trainings.
Yeah.
It was different park has different programs, and it's so surprising because many people came to us.
And you did it for free.
Yes, it was free. Yes, it was for me something new,
Yes,
some
that's
special. Yes, but it's so good comments because it was really good comments after. And we are asked if we could do like a video for this. And in my Instagram, I do this video, and it's all summer was like this. I was so surprised because all of that people, young, all different ages, there came to psychologist first time. It's because it was free. Because when I was in university, everywhere, everybody told me it's should to pay. We should to pay for that. People should to pay. But I decided to do it because I think maybe world is change. We are change. We should be more soft, maybe. And for me, it was so strange because it's really have like many people came first time, and maybe sometimes they came for art, maybe sometimes for therapy, sometimes just for park or something. But they know, and now they are started like spider doing this kaputina, like social position from this person. They are coming to me like friends. And it's good reclam, like it's good reclam for me, for my center, and I like it a lot. That now I have feel that's now it's just coming, как сказать, отдача.
No, it's got feedback.
Feedback, yes, right now in this time. Yes, maybe this I want to tell you about my center. And if you have some questions, I would like to answer about some specialists, because I'm alone in Moscow here, like a therapist. Katerina, maybe in Moscow, in Russia. Also, we have programs, but it's not free in different places. Like my dream to go in like whole the world and do these trainings, but by the way, it's a difficult way. And we're trying to do it in Russia. Also, in many countries we did it now. But I want to tell that when we came some place like Kurgan or Sochi or Anapa, and we're trying to do it, for people it's always expensive, but it's just money to buy tickets, to take hotel, something like that. But for people it's very expensive. In Moscow maybe not, but for that people it's expensive. But that people are need more, because they don't have. When we came to this place, they ask why we don't have the same people, why we don't have the same helper, because they really live in difficult
conditions.
Yes.
But then because everybody who is trained, they come to Moscow to make money here and never come back to the regions.
Yes,
So
yes. It's really bad things about Russia, and I always feel that why we have this situation, and we're trying to do less price, but usually we couldn't go down. Yes.
That's how do you organize your income? Your income, how do you organize it? Is it from seminars, or do you also sell sessions?
Yes, of course. I work by private, of course.
And how much do you charge?
In 1 hour?
Yeah, average.
In euro, yes.
Yes.
It's in rubles. It's 3,000 ruble in 1 hour.
It's about 35 euros.
35 euros. But before it was more.
That's money.
35.
That's money.
But yes, it's good money, and I want to have good money. But if we are talking about trainings, They couldn't give me in Kurgan 3,000 in 1 hour. They couldn't maybe give me 1,000. They just have like 500. That's it. Because it's very difficult life there. That's why they
you do the trainings in Moscow.
Yes. Also in Dubai, for them $100 it's not a problem for 2 hours or 1 hour. That's why different style. I want to tell you because we also had in Florence, the people who are living in Florence, also we are working with this woman in Dubai and sometimes in Cyprus. But in Russia is a
So
difficult
it
situation.
travels, but you do it in many different locations.
Yes.
You take the same program and format.
But yes, we did. We have some locations, maybe with, for me, if I have some friends here or some partners there, for me it's more easy. If not, for me it's very difficult. But anyway, in that place, they need it a lot.
Yeah, it sounds very creative and brave, actually. Actually, it's interesting though about the locations. I just wanted to bring that up when you were talking about in the States and like around this. We never really brought it up in this talk, but the proliferation of video, of Skype sessions, because that is one thing it does, is allows people who can't get therapy, typically, who don't live in cities.
Well, there's one problem with Skype therapy,
it's a big discussion.
online therapy. The problem is the confidentiality. You need and it's the problem is the protection of the psychotherapist, not the protection of the client. The client can ask, is he a member of an organization, of a professional organization, is he registered, or so you can look up the profile. But you can, it's difficult for the psychotherapist to identify the patient, the online patient, and you don't know whether it's a female patient, whether her husband is watching at the same time, recording it and using it at court. There are cases in the States where the husband said that the psychotherapist was destroying my marriage, and so and therefore it is necessary to have some kind of how to say in English,
disclosure statement.
To protect the data.
It's funny, I trusted a lot more than I never asked for
and that
IDs.
is not yet solved. That is not yet solved, and therefore the psychotherapy, not the counseling. The counseling works well online, but psychotherapy where you share intimate data need to be protected. This is the dilemma, and it's not yet solved. We had a guideline about that, also in Austria, a ministerial guideline. They forbid at all online psychotherapy, what is nonsense. But it is a dilemma in which psychotherapists are, and I don't know one who lives out of online psychotherapy. Some do it, but no one can live fully from it.
I earn most of my income from online.
So you are the first who I get to know.
I also, me also. Yeah.
Online.
Yes.
Because you get the income.
Yes. I have to travel so much because of you also.
And
yes.
I actually can't get people to come, a lot of people who won't come in person because their anxiety, the point is to get them eventually to come in person because their anxiety levels and stuff, young people.
For the World Congress, to make a symposium on that, because this is new. This is new. I know many, but you are the first ones who can live out of it.
If there is a data protection, somebody should just make an app like Snapchat for
Yeah, there you go.
If we are speaking about regulation, for example, in Germany, according to the German law, the insurance could pay for your therapy if you're not it's not possible for you to go to the therapist.
Yeah.
But then you have to apply for insurance first for online therapy, and just because of data, if they approve it, you can see your therapist online.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a difference to Austria.
I think it's how you conduct it too. Like I always make sure that it's a confidential space. Like make them move the camera, you know, and like it's clear that anyway, things like that. But it is, of course, a big scandalous debate.
I think it's quite, for me, it seems like to be contemporary. It's so many professions work online. I follow 5 fully working psychotherapists. They are live a digital nomad life and travel through the world. They don't have their office.
Yeah.
So I think not only the psychotherapies.
May I, a second question. How do you organize that the clients pay you?
I trust them.
Online system.
They always do.
Online system.
Like
Pay in advance for
Yeah.
a session.
But it's true. I think that
Pay or something like that, but I don't make them pay in advance. They pay after each 4th session. So, and it has never happened to me since.
So they pay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot missing. I think the bigger debate is what's missing with the body and the coordination of the money and things like this. That's for me, that's a big issue.
I'm doing this sometimes with somebody I'm waiting to, because in Russia they have a very good digitalized banking system. And usually if my client is from the Russian field, he said, I'm going to send you the money now. And I'm beep, okay, I got it, thank you.
It's been
Oh, really?
Yeah. Especially in Russia, they're obsessed with paying that way.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but also this was one of my biggest thoughts. I was listening to our professors during my first year of education, and then some of our professors told us that if you're a psychotherapist, so the very classic conservative psychoanalyst, and he said every time it's a big problem to go on vacation as a psychoanalyst because you just have to be there. You have to be in the city. You have to be available. And I got almost a heart attack. I thought, I don't want this to be my future. Like, I can be connected to one city only and be always there for somebody. And so for me to living in the digital, not future, nowadays, it's the one and only reason. And one and only thing makes me live my professional life in the way I want to live it. And I'm also leading training therapy groups online, and it's such an amazing experience because they know me and they want me to be the training therapist. And if I have to do the session from the New York taxi because I'm on my way to the Congress and the time difference too high, they're okay with this because
from Kiev.
Yeah, I've done it from Kiev and from Vienna, from everywhere.
You have no problem if you would be a client to tell intimate things online?
Why would you?
No.
Everything's in the headset, nobody else can hear. No.
I actually recently, I've been doing this thing where I work I'm an artist as well. I work for my art studio with other artists, and it's like adult play therapy. It's just things that could have never been done before. It's like studio to studio. It's quite interesting.
But I think also the thing what actually really makes me getting natural into this field of distance relationship is my deepest friendship to my friends from the university. Because we split at some moment. I went to Moscow, Sandra went to Berlin, and our girls and boys went to our countries, but we were still in a daily contact. And so to get this native self-experience about being so far away, but being so close daily, like also with Tatiana, makes me realize I can do it also to my clients. And of course, maybe not everybody, maybe you wouldn't choose me as a psychotherapist, but my candidates in training therapy and people going into my supervision group, they love it. And it's giving me so many possibilities. For example,
I wouldn't choose you.
I will think about taking you.
So there are three generations. The generations from your anecdote, the no computer age generation, then the digital immigrants, they learned in the 80s, and the digital natives like you are and Kato. So we raised up with, we are totally fine and confident with that, and we trust in the system. And also our patients, for them that's normal to self-open themselves to talk about intimate stuff. They trust in the technology. It's normal.
Because
but as Kato said, when you're used to it.
Our clients live the same life.
And
to speak on FaceTime.
I actually worked with a 73-year-old woman through Skype, and she was really fine with it.
Just to bring it back to personal brand a little bit, and to that discussion, because of that new technology being out there, and you said, we had never used Instagram, and now we do. We have a vector of working with corporate clients as well as in private practice, and one of the sort of things that was born out of demand is to package and create personal brands for our colleagues and for our clients, for that matter, and how to have presence on Facebook, on Instagram, and where they should, and how to sort of package them up to be presented at conferences and to create that digital image, because people are not familiar with it. Not everybody is, and not to everybody it comes out natural. But there are services and people that could help you have a digital footprint and to integrate you much better into the profession.
Absolutely. We also sometimes my young patients and clients are asking me to watch their Tinder profile from their phone, because they said, every time I'm attracting some crazy masochistic or sadistic guys, would you take a look on my Tinder profile and give me feedback? And sometimes it's just the way they're choosing the photos or representing themselves, or if some young kids, teenagers are coming to me to therapy and they're depressed, and sometimes I'm just asking them to give me their Facebook profile, because it makes me realize how do they want to be, how do they want to be seen, and what's the real life. And then I can...
Are there clients who just by internet?
I have them.
Yes.
You have.
You mean without video, or?
So they write you a mail. I want to have therapy with you.
Yes, word of mouth.
And you say yes, okay, let's start with Skype.
Well, like for example, I'm a Lacanian. People want a Lacanian, and there's not many in the world, so you know.
And also, the most of the psychotherapists, Russian-speaking psychotherapists, who has chosen me as a training therapist and who is going to my online therapeutic group, 80% of them I never seen in my life, but I'm used to work with them.
And they pay.
Yes, that's why I'm doing this.
In Austria, don't pay.
Yeah, why you're so suspicious about this?
No, I mean single cases. My experiences of single cases.
Asking for a friend.
Professionally.
You wouldn't know that.
Professionally, that is really interesting for me.
My analyst didn't work because he never knew about PayPal.
Can I tell you,
and he did.
A CEO from a big management firm showed me an email where he said, look, one of my assistants sent me an email that a YouTuber has, 100,000 followers, and the video gets 10,000 clicks in half an hour, and he talks about how politics dress. What is the style of dressing from politics? And he's smiling, and he's just authentic, like YouTube are. And they are so shocked by that a YouTuber has more followers than every politics in the video. So it shifts a bit, it wouldn't be the only variable,
Exactly.
the only thing how many followers you have.
Вот там должны быть указатели.
You have to fire from all cylinders. You have to have quality, talent, qualifications, and also build your own tiny, not brand, but presence in the internet, and have a digital footprint you are okay with, or you are very conscious about how you like to present yourself and the profession. So I think it's important to have it all.
Keep it in mind.
But it doesn't pay.
And also, I think sometimes if some colleagues of mine, more conservative, are asking, wow, but are you not, your clients or patients are not afraid of you being so active and traveling around and doing online? I told them there are so many clients and so many psychotherapists. So my clients are loving it. They have chosen me because of this. And somebody who needs a therapist, who is sleeping in his praxis and never has been to another city, he will find a therapist like this, because nowadays we have a lot of people to choose.
Mm-hmm. I ask on Facebook, do you stalk your therapist? Do you like to get private information from him? I asked them, and they answered me not in a really open way, maybe, but they say nothing to that. And what I like to say.
But you are stalking your clients.
No, I don't.
It works still.
No, I don't do it. But when they say, show, I have to show you my profile. Yeah, I want to see it. It gives me more knowledge from the patients. Not the only, but it brings something more into my mind.
Tinder is
No, sorry. We talk about transference and projection.
That's
so
the
most psychotherapists say, oh my God, when there is a photo of myself in the internet, maybe the transference isn't okay. Maybe there are so many protections, but really? Are psychotherapists normal persons or not? Or should it be isolated and just about law? And what? And how? So which impact has it really to the transference and projections? And what's the outcome of it? And is the outcome really so bad? So I hope there will be a discussion, and I hope one of the last ones, because
I have a last question.
Yeah.
This is about the duration of these internet talks. Normally a session takes 45 to 60 minutes. Is the same in the internet or shorter?
Same. Or longer. It depends on your style. And the best
So you make the same income if you do online or not?
Yes. It depends also on style. Some colleagues of us are taking 80% of the offline therapy costs for online therapy, because they don't have to pay for praxis. It all depends on your style.
And for instance, with Lacan, he plays with the time.
This is interesting.
So the Lacanians maybe say now just 10 minutes.
They're actually the most against it, Lacanians, because of the real of the body, but it makes an even sharper cut, and that's so important for Lacanians. When you choose to stop it, it's interesting. You don't deal with the obsessive going out the door and one more thing to say.
Just push the red button.
You just cut it.
I know Lacanians who just make a 10-minute session.
Sometimes.
And sometimes
if it works,
15 minutes, and sometimes Lacan himself
sometimes 2 hours.
did a few minutes sessions. So, when you take a few minutes, you can have many more patients in 1 hour, as so the seduction of money is the danger.
Yeah.
Indeed.
From
That's
my point of view,
more
this is the
issue.
Lacanian idea. Because by what are you triggered? By making it short, or by taking the fixed time.
But wouldn't you be triggered by achieving results?
Or achieving results would also be a motivation.
Yeah.
And this is also not dependent from the time.
But we are dependent from the time, and we have 4 minutes left. And I would like to say something, last words on what you were talking about. So, if my client don't want to be penetrated by my private or professional pictures on my profile on Facebook, he's just not stalking me in internet. So it's not something he will see daily. Because if you are not adding somebody as a friend and not connected, and if you are having a private profile, he is not going to see it. So the client still choosing if he wants to see something from you and from your private life or the life you're living in the digital social media world or not. So it's also
But it is complicated. For instance, in my case, I'm not in Facebook, not in Instagram, not in Tinder.
Not directly, I mean.
I've seen.
What did you say?
Since yesterday, there's pictures all over.
Yeah.
From
last night, yes.
But only professionally.
But
only
that's
professionally.
enough.
Yeah, of course.
Not
amateurs.
not privately.
Yeah.
And this is the dilemma when I think of Facebook, for instance. I often was thinking maybe I have to comment a lot in the world. I would like to comment, but then
But there's no rule that you have to put a picture of your family on Facebook. You could keep it
but
strictly professional.
when I say something about the situation in Russia and in US, I'm branded.
It's a choice, I think.
Better you than many who don't have education that you have that put in all
Yes.
the messages.
Yes, but and therefore I don't say anything.
Okay, dears. We are out of time. I would like to thank you for this amazing 2 days. I was really enjoying this so much. And thank you, Professor Pritz, for being with us all this time. You are our special guest, because you was the one who was spending all the time with us. And I would love to come back to your idea to make this kind of symposium on online therapy. But you said
that is
it's
tremendously necessary.
And you said it's such an interesting topic, we should do it at the World Congress in Russia. It's going to happen in 2 years. Our generation, if 2 years, it's just too long.
No, this will be a long seller.
Yeah.
You can be sure.
But
So in 2 years, it will still be a topic.
Yes, but
For the digital immigrants.
For the digital immigrants.
Yes.
Yeah. But we from the youth section of the World Council for Psychotherapy are living different dynamics, so we are going to organize this discussion, maybe online, very soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fine.
Very interesting.
Thank you very much, guys.
Завершите презентацию.
Let's make a picture.
Вы нас не сфоткаете?
No problem.
Who has a good camera? Because mine has a split.
Would you like to have mine?
I have one.
Кирилл, сделайте
You can save it online.
Да.
Of course.
Yes.
Oh, it's for the Tinder therapy.
Where is the best place to make it?
Yeah.
Where is the best place here to make it?
Where we have the most bags.
Yeah, maybe there. Yeah.
Like this was.
А тумба может поместиться? Да? Может ее подвинуть? Да.
Она помещается.
Помещается? Окей.
Все очень окей. Секундочку. Cheese. Okay. Oh, and one more. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sandra, we will send it to our group on Facebook, okay?
Yes, the generation of these.
Ни слова не сказал сегодня?
There was a lot of studies. Our generation